Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Thank you. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikacharya Ashtratarsha Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Charles Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikacharya Ashtratarsha Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Yamuna Mai ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Yurdayet Nasta Prayod Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, Text 9. Esha nityo avyayaha sūkṣma esha sarvashrayaha swadrik Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ Vishvam Atmanam Srijate Prabhu Esha nitya vyaya sūkṣma Esha sarvashraya swadrik Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ Vishvam Atmanam Srijate Prabhu Esha nityo vyaya sūkṣma Esha sarvashraya swadrik Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ Vishvam Atmanam Srijate Prabhu Esha nityo vyaya sūkṣma Esha sarvashraya swadrik Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ Vishvam Atmanam Srijate Prabhu. Esha nityo vyaya sūkṣma Srijate Prabhu. Tyler.
Esha nityo vyaya sūkṣma
Esha nityo vyaya sūkṣma
Esha sarvashraya svadrik Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ Vishvam Ātmanam srijate Prabhu.
Esha nitya vyaya sūkṣma. Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ. So, no. Synonyms: Eshaha, this living entity; Nityaha, eternal; Avyayaha, imperishable; Sūkṣmaha, very, very fine, not seen by the material eyes. Eshaha, this living entity; Sarva Ashrayaha, the cause of the different types of bodies. Swadrik, self-effulgent. Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead's modes of material nature. Vishvam, this material world. Ātmanam, himself. Srijate, appears. Prabhu, the Master. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Purport. In this verse, the philosophy of Achintya, Bheda, simultaneously oneness and difference, is described. The living entity is eternal, nitya, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the difference is that the Supreme Lord is the greatest, no one being equal to or greater than him, whereas the living entity is sūkṣma, or extremely small. The śāstra describes that the magnitude of the living entity is 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. The Supreme Lord is all-pervading. Andartarasva paramanu chayantarastam. Relatively, if the living entity is accepted as the smallest, there should naturally be inquiry about the greatest. The greatest is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the smallest is the living entity. Another peculiar characteristic of the jīva is that he becomes covered by māyā. Ātmamāyā-guṇaiḥ. He is prone to being covered by the Supreme Lord's illusory energy. The living entity is responsible for his conditional life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu, the Master. If he likes, he can come to this material world, and if he likes, he can return home back to Godhead. Because he wants to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him a material body through the agency of the material energy. As the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita 18:61, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hirdesha arjuna tishtate brahmayam sarva bhutani yantra rudrani māyā. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Lord gives the living entity a chance to enjoy in this material world as he desires. But he openly expresses his own desire that the living entity give up all material aspirations, fully surrender unto him, and return home, back to Godhead. The living entity is the smallest, sūkṣma. Jīva Goswami says in this connection that the living entity within the body is extremely difficult for materialistic scientists to find, although we understand from authorities that the living entity is within the body. The body is different from the living entity. Om Jnana Timara Andasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahayam Dadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kantara Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sita Devi Pranamami Hare Pri Vanchakalpatariyubhyascha Kripa Sundibhi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna and good morning. So when Dvijamani and myself were coming back from the BBT last Monday, I saw a billboard that was interesting. It had a piece of flesh on this dish, and it said, "Sinfully good cuisine." So these demons, they know that it's a sin to kill an animal, but they're advertising it. So this is Kali Yuga. And the innocent public, when they see that, it motivates them, inspires them to, let's go check that out. And they don't know that they're incurring sin by eating meat. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, he would emphasize and stress on this point that this simple, basic principle of non-violence, not killing, the Christians and basically every religion, practice, faith, they cannot understand that. So I thought it was an interesting. Cannot understand. So, just like when we go on book distribution, we try to convince people to come to our Krishna Lounge event. But a lot of them, they say, "I don't have time." So when you ask them, "Why don't you have time?" They say, "I have to work. I have my business. I have school." When you ask them, "Why are you going to work? Why are you going to school?" "So I want to get money." And when you ask them, "Why do you want to get money?" They say, "I want food and a roof over my head." And then when you ask them, "Why do you want a roof over your head and eat?" They said, "To survive." And they said, "Why do you want to survive?" They said, "To live." And then when you ask them, "Why do you want to live?" And they stay quiet. They don't know why are they living. So this very basic and important question, why am I living? People, they're not even asking. What is the goal of life? And is the goal of life simply to earn money, to earn a big position in this world and then die and leave everything? And sadly, a lot of people, they think this is the goal of life. They're not willing to experience anything higher than this. They just want worldly pleasures and some enjoyment, and then die like a cat or a dog, like what Srila Prabhupada says. So a thoughtful person will begin to start thinking about this. We shouldn't wait because death can happen at any moment. We've all heard stories from devotees, from people, from television that, a person just walking by and then all of a sudden a tree falls on him or a car crashes into them. Like our Dayanidhi Prabhu, he was just going on a very simple, innocent bike ride. He got hit by a car and he was hospitalized for a long time. He had to get stitches. So, what's that famous line? Padam padam yatve padam natesham. In this material world, there's danger in every step. Just like even when you're sitting on the floor, when you stand up, you lose circulation in your legs, and then you can fall. So this material world, it's not a very good place to stay in. And then Prahlad Maharaj, he describes the condition to his father, Hiranyakashipu. And Srila Prabhupada, he points out that the name Hiranyakashipu means what? Gold and bed, soft bed cushion and a bed companion. Yeah. So there's a materialistic thinking. I want gold, I want to accumulate wealth, and I want to have a nice partner to enjoy, right? Hiranyakashipu. So he says, Nate vidu swarta gatim hi Vishnu. That these foolish persons, they do not know that the ultimate goal of, Prabhupada would say, happiness is Vishnu, God, the Supreme Lord. So we're trying to convince these people, please join our Krishna consciousness movement, but they refuse. And as you can see, they're struggling very hard. When you go out on book distributions, you see so many different people with different faces and expressions. And a lot of them, they're struggling and suffering like anything, but this illusion, this, what do you call it? To maintain this image of, oh, I'm doing good, right? I'm good. And you just kind of feel sorry for them, like actually you're not good. You're 60 years old, you're putting Botox on your face, you know, and your lip looks all messed up and you think you're good. You're still trying to be young, right? This is what we call midlife crisis. And I narrated this before, but there was this old couple, they were dressed up celebrating. And I said, excuse me, what's the occasion? Is it your anniversary? I said, no, we're getting married. Elderly people, they're still trying to find Mr. and Mrs. Right in this material world. So that's the foolishness of the people. And generally, there are 4 classes of thought. There is God, there is no God. The third one is everyone's God. And the fourth one is I am God. But if I can, Srila Prabhupada, he would say we can add a 5th category. The dog is God, right? And so many people on book distribution, they're bringing their dogs along. And some of them just have a fresh picked up dog stool in their hand and they're holding on to it. At least it's in a bag. But they're passing through so many trash cans, but they're not throwing it away. So this is attachment, right? And no, they would just hold it. And then I would feel they just hold it in their hand. Yeah. And Maharaj, huh? I don't know what they're going to do with it. You know, worship it, do arti to it. So my spiritual master, His Holiness Bhadrinarayan Swami Maharaj, he has these crazy neighbors. And he pointed out to me, look inside those buckets. And when I looked in these buckets, there's piles of dog stool in a bag. They're holding on to it. For what? We don't know.
There must be a regulation that you can't put it into the bucket. You look at it.
Okay, yeah. So there's buckets of dog stool just sitting there. And so how will they understand higher topics of Krishna consciousness? And I met this man in Balboa Park. I said, excuse me, I have a book for you. And he said, no thanks, I worship Satan. Right. So I said, okay. So when he came back, I said, how's your friend Satan? And then he goes, huh? He forgot about it. So these people, they're so foolish and they're trying to hide their real insecurities in life. And Srila Prabhupada, he would often say that they are envious of God. And who are these people that are envious? The atheists. Just like Balboa Park before they kicked all of the vendors out of the grass, you know. They would have different groups like musicians, Jehovah's Witness, people that sell jewelry, arts and craft. And there was one group that were considered the friendly neighborhood atheists, right? And they're out there promoting this idea that there is no God. But you can't blame them because there's so many corruption and there's so many instances where people are looking for God, but they haven't heard the right answer, right? When I was searching, I didn't hear a good answer. So sometimes a person will conclude maybe there is no God. There's so much suffering in the world. Why doesn't God just come here and straighten things out. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport of Bhagavad Gita, he says something interesting. He says, as far as the miscreants are concerned, for them devotional service is very difficult. Why? Because their lives are selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. So that sums up the public. And how are they selfish? All they think about is me, myself, and I, or my family, my extended family. Just like when you try to stop people, they say, no thanks, my daughter, she's hungry. It's like they're being pulled by their daughter, you know. They act like their daughter is going to die within the next 5 minutes, you know. So there's a story. There was a rich man, and he just purchased a nice car. And this car, it was very expensive. It would go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, you know. He would show it off as blah, blah, blah horsepower, you know. As twin turbo engines, all-wheel drive. So when he was driving on the road, there was this little boy on the footpath, and he threw a brick, and he hit his car. And this man, he came out of his car, and he was going to apprehend the little boy. He was going to beat him, actually, because he was so angry. So he said, why did you throw that brick? And the little boy, he had tears in his eye. He said, I'm sorry, there was no other way. I've been trying to stop people, but they wouldn't stop. So he pointed to the side. He said, my older brother, he's wheelchair bound. He had fallen from an accident, and I can't lift him up, so I need help. So the man, he was so touched by the story, and he helped him up. And then the moral of the story, he refused to repair the dent. He said, I should remember this day, that my life, I should remember that there are more important things in my life. For example, me becoming helpful and valuable for others. That I should live for the sake of others to do something beneficial for the world. So the devotees, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take them off of this selfish mentality and to be a selfless servant. But the difficulty, everyone has free will, right? You could lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And even when they receive Srila Prabhupada's books, how long will it take for them to open up a page? How long will it take for them to read one line? How many lives will it take for them to understand how important this human form of life is? And another thing is that Prabhupada says they are irregular. Their eating and their sleeping habits. There was these two young ladies, they were walking by a book table. And one of them said, yeah, I woke up so early today. So I was thinking, okay, what do they consider early, right? So I woke up at 7. And for devotees, we're already up, you know. We already did a whole morning program. We already chanted our rounds, you know. But for people, 7 o'clock is very early for them. And their eating habits, you know. The devotees, we have certain times in which we eat. And it actually makes sense. But for them, they're eating breakfast at noontime, you know. They're eating lunch 3 o'clock in the morning. And on top of that, whatever they're eating, it's not in accordance to Vedic, you can say, diet. I remember I was distributing books and I was trying to explain to this man that garbage in, garbage out. And if you're eating a disgusting, rotting piece of flesh, it'll cover your consciousness and you won't be able to understand these books. And he said, but I like my meat. So even if you give them good argument and philosophy, and even for health reasons, they will still refuse. And you see this in Balboa Park also. You know, the dogs that are not trained, they're just pulling the owners, and they're smelling and urinating on every pillar. And whatever they see on the ground, they sniff it. They move like that. So these people, they're being pulled by their minds, their senses, their desires. And when you try to stop them, they have no time, right? They don't want to make time for us. And Srila Prabhupada says, without spiritual goals. When I visited my brother, he was telling me he went to a very unique event. You guys know what it was? It was a cat event. Cat event. There's vendors that are selling merchandise, apparel for kittens. So these are people's interests nowadays. And Srila Prabhupada, he said they worship cats and dogs, and you can see that, Instead of worshiping Krishna, they want to worship cat. And I like the story that Maharaj tells. There was a little girl, she drew or she wrote a poem. He said, instead of loving a cat or a dog, why not love Krishna, who made all of that?
It rhymed. I don't know what he said.
Yeah, yeah, right. So why not just love Krishna? And in the Mahabharata, so many people, they saw Krishna personally, but they didn't accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They didn't know his position as the Supreme Lord. Avajananti ma muda ma nishim tanum ashritam. That foolish people, they deride Krishna when he descends in the human form. They do not know his transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So even sometimes we take for granted that Krishna is here, right? Krishna is here on the altar, and he is kindly appearing before us to allow us to render some service to Krishna and Radharani. So we should always remember that Krishna is not different from his deity form, his prasadam. On book distribution, you ask people, what's the difference between matter and spirit, the body and the soul? Right? And when you ask them what's more important, the soul or the body, they'll say, oh, both of them are important. Because, like in the purport, it says they don't know the difference between the living entity and the body. And when you tell them that one is permanent and the other one is temporary, they still prefer the temporariness because they're attached to their body. And I told this one person, I said, the more you learn about the soul, the happier you become. So he said, okay. So I was also explaining to him that since the soul is eternal, and when you can tap into that happiness, your happiness is also eternal. And I said, imagine having a perfect day every day. And he smiled. He took the books. And so to know God is not a cheap thing. To enter the kingdom of God is also not a cheap thing. And even if someone knows that they are the soul, they do not know the soul's purpose. They think that the soul's purpose is just to enjoy, live freely, like these hippies or New Age hippies. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says what is the soul's purpose. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishnera Nityadas. That the living entity's constitutional position is to be an eternal servant of Krishna. And when I read Srila Prabhupada's books, I remember him saying that we're going to have to serve somebody. A nation, a country, kinsmen, family, children, a cat or a dog. And it says, but the perfection of service is to Krishna. And that just made so much sense. It clicked in my mind. So I was convinced that, we need to serve someone. So why not serve Krishna? And sometimes I like to ask people, what do you do for work? And you meet scientists, philosophers. And my favorite now are the teachers. I said, you're a teacher? They said, yes. So I said, let me ask you a question. Suppose I was a student and I ask you, who am I? And what is the purpose and the meaning of life? How would you answer that? And these teachers, so-called teachers, they don't know how to answer it. And Srila Prabhupada, he was explaining this, that people are teaching, but they don't know what they're teaching. So he asked one of his disciples, what do you call that? And then the disciple said, he's a cheater, Prabhupada, he's a cheater. So I told this person, I said, imagine if that was the last question that the student had before he was to do something drastic like suicide. He's searching for answers, but you cannot provide him a good answer. And so they were really deeply touched by that question. So they took the two set of books that I gift wrapped, The Science of Self-Realization and The Journey of Self-Discovery. Even the titles themselves are so attractive. And when I asked this one question to this other teacher, he says, I don't know, but I know it's going to be in these books. So he automatically grabbed the books from my hand, and they said, how much for these books? Srila Prabhupada, he says, when people are looking for gold, they're willing to pay for it. But if they want plastic, they'll also pay for plastic. So we're going to have a lot of no's on book distribution, but that shouldn't stop us. Because then there's that one person, right? That one person, I want to get these books. And also ask these teachers, what is the purpose of education? There was this couple, the lady was a teacher, and then the man, he was a manager of a nightclub, you know. And when I asked this question, he turned to the lady and said, ooh, that's a good question. What are you going to say? He was so into it, you know. So the lady, she was, you know, some basic answer. So I said, the purpose of education is self-realization. To understand that I'm not the body, but I'm the soul within the body, and actually have a higher purpose as a soul. And Srila Prabhupada, he would say that this body is a bag full of blood, bones, urine, feces, you know. So we don't want to identify with the body. And I'll conclude. There was this family they looked like Africa, they were from Africa, but they were practicing Christianity. So I don't want to take up too much of their time, and I don't want to waste my time. So I turned to the daughter. The daughter was 8 years old. I said, you look like an intelligent young lady. She said, I am. So I said, is killing bad? Is killing wrong? And she said, yeah, it's very wrong. So I said, what do you think about killing animals and eating them? And then that just grinded her gears, you know. Yeah, we know it's wrong, but then to eat them, right? So she looked at the dad, and then the dad was nervous, you know. Because they all just admitted that killing is bad. Now you're going to try to justify it, right? So hypocrisy. So before they left, the girl, she kept tugging at her dad, saying, why are we eating meat? Why are we eating meat? Yeah. So you can implant a seed in even the younger people, because the argument is very solid. And another thing too is that when people are growing up, they're taught, right? You're God's gift to the world, right? And couples, they even wear these cheesy sweatshirts. The guy will have king, and then the lady will have queen. So they already have this misconception that, you know, I'm the enjoyer in this world. So when you tell them that you're actually the servant, they don't want to hear that, right? They don't want to hear it. So we kindly and humbly try to persuade them, you know. Actually, you're not God. You're not the enjoyer, but you're an eternal servant. And I witnessed, or I can say from my own experience, you know, I'm nobody. When I was traveling with my spiritual master to Singapore, India, Burma, they were treating me like I was a sannyasi, you know, because I was serving Maharaj. I was able to go to the different rooms, like, you know, exclusive rooms that they only allow, you know, people in that ashram, or that you can say importance. And here I was, right, even in the LA temple. I was having lunch with Swavash Prabhu, his wife, Brigupati, you know, like these really nice personalities. I'm just there eating with my hands, you know, like, okay, what am I doing here? But a servant, as long as he knows his position, he can enjoy the same as the king, right? But when the servant starts thinking, you know, I want to be king, then he gets in trouble, because that's not his position. And I'll end with this nice story. So I was at my parents' house because my mom said I had some letters. And I decided to wash the car. And as I was finishing, my neighbor across the street, he looked at me and he said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So we met in the middle of the street, just in the middle, like he was so immersed in the conversation that we forgot there's cars passing by. So I said, let's go in the garage, So I invited him to my parents' garage, and I brought out a seat for him. And then I was telling Balaram yesterday, if you want to see a face that looks like, if you want to see the definition of sadness, confused, frustrated, pain, suffering, you can see it in this person's face. His hair was all messed up, shoveled.
How old was he?
He's probably my age, like 30-something, mid-30s. And when we were talking, he said, "You're a monk, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What kind of monk?" And I said, "I'm a Hare Krishna monk." He said, "Oh, Hare Krishna. I remember you guys dancing on the street, chanting, like you guys look so blissful." I said, "We are." So then he started asking questions like, if you can imagine Sanatana Goswami, at the feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was like that. He was asking all these nice questions, and he was saying, he pointed at his house, at his car. He had a nice car. He said, all of that, it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, he was on the verge of, like, breaking down, So anyway, I don't know what more to explain to him. So I went in, and I left a hardcover SSR in my parents' house, hoping one day they'll read it, but they didn't. They don't. So I brought that out, and I gave it to the young man. And as I gave it to him, he took this book and he held it in his chest. And you can tell he was just searching for answers. So anyway, my mom came out, and he saw this, right? She saw this. The neighbor, he's sitting down, and I'm sitting down. He has a book in his hand. And my mom, she's not very supportive in this path that I'm in. So after the guy went back to his house, I went in there and I gave him some prasadam, some fruits. And then I noticed my mom, she followed me. She went to their house also and was trying to convince him, you shouldn't get that book. Imagine that. So the boy, he said, "No, I'm actually interested in this." So my mom said, "Okay." So anyway, they were talking, and then we left. And then, I don't want to go on and on, but long story short, he invited me over again. He said, "I really want to speak to you again. I want to know more information." So I asked him, when are you available? And he said, "My parents are going to be picked up. They're leaving to the Philippines." So he said, "Can you come by after 15 minutes? So after 15 minutes, he said, "Please call me or text me when you're outside." So I texted him. And then he said, "We were neighbors for more than 20 years, but I never got to know you and your brother." And I remember recalling, I saw his friends, His hair was slicked back. He looked like a nice, pretty boy like that. And he saw me and my friends, So it was like two different worlds, but we're neighbors for a long time, and we're never able to get to know each other. So anyway, he pulled me into the backyard, and he had his tree house. We were sitting there, and he was just asking questions, what made you follow this path? How do you know this path is the right path? So I was trying to answer as best as I could. And then, to end, he will be coming to the Krishna Lounge. Yeah. He said, "I want to experience this, And I told him the example of like the honey in the jar, You can't taste it by looking outside. You have to open the jar and actually taste the honey. So I said, you have to try this process of chanting. And after I left, he sent me a text message. He said, "Govi, thank you so much for your time." He said, from the pages that I read, they're gems like that. So he's reading the books. So we should never underestimate the potency of Srila Prabhupada's books, this movement, People are looking for purposes in life. They're looking for movements. They're looking for some event to fulfill their, missing hole, a hole in their heart. And a good way is through book distribution and also the Harinam. When they did the Harinam to the boardwalk, there was two people that came that one on the day of the 50th anniversary, and then one Mataji, she came for the Krishna Lounge. It's because she saw the devotees blissfully chanting on the streets. And also the young man, he said, you know what I like about you Hare Krishnas? I said, what? He said, you guys are open. Other religions, they're secretive, you know. Like you don't know who they are. But the devotees, you know, they're out there like that. Okay, thank you for your time. Are there any questions or comments, corrections? Yes, Ravita Prabhu.
That first little vignette about the sinful. It's sinfully good. So, we take it, they're inadvertently giving the truth. It's sinfully mean. Mm-hmm. But their actual meaning is also significant. Why is it sinfully good? Because anything that gives you an extreme pleasure is sinful. That's what that's saying. They're not thinking it's sinfully good because you're killing a cow. It's sinfully good because it's just way beyond anything you've tasted, you know. So it's that, and that's automatically, you know, sinful. But that's reflective of what, you know, our philosophy is, that all these sense gratifications, when it's extreme and, you know, out of bounds, and it's sinful, it binds you. Mm-hmm. So they're, in that way, they're inadvertently giving you the truth.
Huh?
The restaurant is Hell's Kitchen.
Okay. The restaurant, Mogalila Prabhu says, called the Hell's Kitchen.
And actually, I think it's opened in Vegas, right? So triple sin. So that was such a wonderful class. Your stories are so nice. Thank you. I've really missed being here, Prabhu. That was excellent. I was actually going to say that I think you're talking about that Mataji that started coming a month or two ago. She saw a Moga just walking on Pacific Beach and said, "That's a saint." She wanted to know, where are they at? Oh, they're here? You know.
It's another Mataji.
So yeah, that was another story. The younger one who's been coming around for a couple months, she takes prashad with us. She came to morning program. She's quiet.
Andrea.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
it's another lady.
So, because he saw you your whole life, and you know you're kind of a rascal in high school, and now he sees you as a saint, you know. So, and you've attracted him naturally. You didn't even try that, and your mom's even trying to convince him not to do it, you know. And that's really awesome. And you left that book there. That's like that time bomb going off. Wow, it was really, really good.
Yeah, and
that's
the
awesome.
whole time he would just. I can tell he was really searching for a way out. You know, he also understood karma and reincarnation, and he also said, "How do I break free from this cycle?"
Wow. Hopefully, he has a nice experience at the lounge too.
So it was like that seed, you know.
There was a Prabhu who attended. We were in the Bay Area this weekend. He went to basically a Krishna lounge for the first time, and at the end of it, he was bawling. He was crying. You know. Then they invited him to the home program the next day, so he just had that first taste of kirtan, and it really. So these people need it, you know, and they don't know what they're looking for, but they're looking. What I like what Vijay does when he distributes the Gita, he shows them the pictures, and then he shows them how to read it. Mm-hmm. So then I think that's really encouraging. They actually reads a little bit with them. So you said it because they might not even open the book or read a sentence, but the way he presents it, you know, this is Sanskrit, this is the translation, you know. There was in the purport, there's this idea, it was kind of new for me, the living entity is responsible for his conditional life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu, the master. So I don't know, it just kind of struck me, because, you know, we call each other Prabhu, you know, but we are Prabhu of our life? We're responsible? So that's an interesting, I don't know, I don't want to feel puffed up. They're saying I got myself into trouble by being Prabhu. I put myself into the material condition of life. But yeah, yes, I thought you'd jump in. Thank you. Okay. All right, Herbal.
So, it reminds me of when in the Bhagavad Gita, in one of my favorite verses, the Purushak Prakatisto Hi Bhakti Prakati Janganam, 13th chapter, 20 or something. And Krishna calls the living entity there the Purusha. Now the Purusha is a word that means the enjoyer. We're Prakriti, Krishna is the ultimate Purusha, but here we're called Purusha because we're, in illusion, taking that role of enjoyer. So you're Prabhu in the sense of the decisions you make are determining your destiny. You have that power to do this, don't do that, and do it. Unfortunately, we're so illusioned that we make the wrong decision and we become dogs in the next life. So that's the idea. In other words, words have different meaning according to the context. So in that particular context, it means that, hey, you have the power to change your destiny. In that sense, you're in control. But of course, we're also under control because of, like I was thinking when you're talking about I forget the early part of your talk, and it came to mind, yes, we're servants. We're already servants of our lower nature, of the lust, anger, greed. That's that verse I quote all the time, kama adinam katina katita, where someone who's awakened and his intelligence has become purified by reading the Journey of Self-Discovery or whatever, then he says, hey, I'm bound up, I'm serving these masters. Like this yesterday when I came home from the temple, a guy was standing outside of my apartment. He was on the part near the curb, and he was staring at his cell phone, engaging the camera, and he was smoking a cigarette. And the cigarette smoke was coming up, and I was, smelling it, But I was thinking, the poor guy, he's imprisoned by that. He's controlled, and Prabhupada talks about it all the time. Oh, I gotta have bidi, If you start smoking, then it becomes your master, and it's very difficult to give it up. So, in one sense, we're the Prabhu. We can decide not to do those things, but unless we have a knowledge, unless the knowledge comes and we get the determination, we end up being servants and bound up and illusioned. And I wanted to just make one point about that word illusioned, because Prabhupada uses it all the time. It's a little archaic because illusion is not used that way anymore. Something can illusion you. It's not a verb, but it works completely as an adjective. Someone is illusioned, and we're being illusioned and deluded. The word is deluded now, by our association, unless we have the knowledge by which we can say, no, I'm not going to associate with that. I'm going to associate with this, and that's what you're giving when you go out to the park. You're giving your association, and you're introducing them to the greatest association, Prabhupada. And one, if you allow me, just one remembrance. That book, The Journey of Self-Discovery. There's so many books we produce. This is the 90s, and Sura Prabhu was always, he quoted this letter from Prabhupada, and he said, yes, you can make books out of my lectures and letters, and that, of course, was done with Queen Kunti, out of lectures, the teachings of Lord Chupiladev. So we had so many lectures from the BTG that were in there, and Judah Karma picked them out, and then I was here, and we were working on the book, and Yamaraj was here. And I was trying to figure up a title, and that came to me. I don't know how, Journey of Self-Discovery. And there were other books that we did. The several others. Search, not coming back, but Quest for Enlightenment, the same format. But it's that title, I think, that intrigues people. After all these years, it's been 30 years that book has been out, more than 30 years. And still, because of the title and the picture on the cover, I got to tell Art should have changed that picture. That was a mistake. He messed up the cover. We were on a deadline. You have to give a cover. I said, well, I took some pictures when I was in India of Barshan or whatever it was, So let's send it up. We'll see. And those pictures were seen by Vaisheshik, and I said, yeah, we'll use this one, if we need it in emergency. And they've been using it ever since.
What cover were they going to put on?
He had done something that had messed up the cover. So, but we had to print the book, so we had it like it was an emergency. But the first cover was designed by Indra Pramad, and it was a picture of the conditioned soul stepping into the spiritual world. I'll show you the old copy I have. It was very intriguing. But after some time, it had been seen. It had been seen. That was intriguing also. But it's that title, I think, that why people still like to distribute it.
Thank you. Is that okay, Tyler?
A little note, we just sent a package of books to this Mataji that asked for it, and we had both those copies. And we were like, which one do we send? And we went with the old cover. Yeah, because they were beginners. So we said, okay, try. And then, just one brief question. That what we were talking about the Prabhu in the purport, can you make an inference from that gives factual basis to that we chose to leave the spiritual world, that idea? Because I know sometimes that's debated.
Definitely. We have, as you've heard a million times, minute independence, because Krishna has infinite independence. So we have his qualities in minute degree. And that minute independence is what makes it possible for us to attain love. Love without, that doesn't have, that you don't choose to give is not really love. So Krishna takes that risk, if you will, of giving us that, because that's what he wants to enjoy, freely given. But that means that we're the minority, there's trillions and trillions of living entities, but we're still like 1/4, I think, of the all living entity. Made the wrong choice at one point. We got curious, curiosity killed the cat. What it would be like to be the master and enjoyer? And Prabhupada, even at one point, he said, Krishna was trying to tell us, don't do it. Trying to convince us, but we insisted on going. So in that sense, we are the makers of our own destiny. That's the whole idea. And we have the freedom to choose to go back to Godhead. But we have to do A, B, C, D, and E, and not do C, D, E, and G.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu, do you have a question?
Yes. Govardhan Prabhu?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Prabhu, the quote from the purport to the text you chose for today, text 9, goes as follows. Quote, Jiva Goswami says in this connection that the living entity within the body is extremely difficult for materialistic scientists to find, although we understand from authorities that the living entity is within the body. End quote. So based on this quote, my question is, why does Srila Prabhupada establishes that the symptom of the presence of the soul in the body is conscience?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Consciousness, yes.
When you ask people, what's something within the body, and then the first thing they'll say is consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada, he says consciousness is a symptom of the soul. So although we can't see the soul, it has symptoms. Consciousness and life are the very symptoms of the soul. And Srila Prabhupada would also point out that they're material instruments, they cannot find the soul. Because the soul is anti-material or anti-matter. It's a spiritual spark. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it says that the soul can never be burned by fire, nor burned by fire, moistened by water, or withered by the wind. So the soul is indestructible, super powerful. So materialistic scientists, they want to, if I can't see it, if I can't touch it, if it's not tangible, it doesn't exist, But Srila Prabhupada would point out, we can't see the wind, we can't see air, gravity. So there's so many things, consciousness, the mind. So how will we find the very finer thing like the soul? Okay, I think that's the best I could do, Vijay Krishna.
Yes, and you did it very well, as to be expected. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your time. Granturaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.